this is Rebel Heart Rose here, coming to you live. And in about 30 minutes, I'll be connected to a meeting.
Just formulating my omega
on here. So, I'm gonna hold up. I'll be back. I'm just gotta go to the bathroom. I'm here. I'm back. Okay. Well, we got about 30 minutes until the meeting starts. So I'm going to try to the webinar, I do have a link to the webinar. I can't share the link publicly, but I can try to put it on here as presenting, which is what I plan on doing. It'll be for a little while yet. We started early. Yeah, I got a text message for them saying the event starts at 8:30. So the Women for Harris This is a very, very, very trying time for us women. At least those of us who are aware of what history has treated us and how we don't want to go back in time to fulfill those roles that we were put in, not by our choice. When women do have a choice, and I don't think anyone should be taking choices away from us. We're human beings first. We have a right to voice our opinions, but it's never okay for anyone to control someone else's life, you know? And that's what it's about. It's about control and power for a party that used to be respectable. Now it's like gone to the trash. It's gone downhill in education wise and common sense wise, and totally the dim-witted party is now becoming. It's the I'd rather have a felon in office than a woman who actually puts felons in jail. So they're scared of a minority getting back in the office. So they'd rather have a dictator who's dim-witted and who isn't that intelligent. And he could play him like a fiddle any day of the week. I mean, come on. People can't you see that in front of your face? It's as clear as day. It's clear as crystal, actually. He's playing his followers like saps, and they don't even care. A lot of people have not cared about politics because they haven't been affected by it yet. Either that or they just feel like we're powerless, but we're not. If all of us got together, we're not powerless. And that's what they don't want, so they sow division. Yeah. United, we have the power. Divided, we do not. And after all these years and how the U.S. is in a big mess, when in history has women ever come behind and cleaned up a guy's mess? As a secretary? As a wife? Some people can agree to that statement and some get mad because in some instances it's true. I'm not saying it's all men either. I'm just saying in those cases it has been the woman cleaning up the mess. And women get some jobs done, and not all women. It's just the best of us that get it done. Because I cannot talk about everyone because there's always a small group that ruins it for either the men or the women or the non-binary. There's always that small percentage that a lot of people think is the majority, but it's only the minority. think we all need to be on each other's sides instead of warring and pettiness. It's just, there's more important things. Our rights, for one, our voices. We don't want to be like Ariel and have our voices taken away from us. Right? Our voices are powerful. We're together. We're mighty. Let's see. And I do not hate men. I hate some actions that men have done and some ideologies that some have that is so in the Stone Age that they need to go back and live it as a woman in order to get a new perspective on their views. I only hate the men. No, I hate the ideology that some men have. I don't hate men in general. I'm hating the ideology that they believe to be true of women, which isn't. If you get what I'm saying. I can forgive a lot. And I have. But how can men, after knowing women who have suffered so many years under control, and we had to fight for so many years for a vote, and how can some women stand behind men like that? I'm cutting both like that. How can you agree with that ideology? When it hurts you in the long run. Both men and women are leaders. And so are people who, what's the word? I said it earlier. Non-binary, they're leaders too. Why can't we look at each other as leaders, as equals, and not as one submissive over the other? That's funny because the term submit is supposed to be done out of love, not demanding, not being in control of one another, but doing it out of love. It's funny how people can take one word and misconstrue it so much. So they believe that they have a right to control and manipulate the other sex, you know? Nothing's better than a good back itch. Back scratch. I could be icky. But I love to try to be fair. That might be a lot of things, but what I'm trying to be most is right down the middle fair. When the world isn't fair, it's up to us to make it fair. Life isn't going to be fair until we make it. We can make it fair. You don't have to accept what life throws at us. We can turn it into something else. What I'm saying. What I'm trying to go through right now to develop myself into something better than just one or the other. I'm trying to be more, if that makes sense. Observing, I learn a lot more than just by talking. I've observed a lot of pain caused by arrogant, stuck up notions like one side's better than the other. And the way I see it, one side is currently more alluring than the other. And this time, we don't want to go back in. We don't want to start having dictators. History has not favored those kind of people and never will. That ideology should have died when Hitler did. And for certain people who don't believe you can be multicultural, which I'd rather say, because there's only one human race. There's many diverse cultures, yes. That's is why I'm saying it's multicultural, as opposed to multiracial. Because there's only one race. That's human race. With multiple different cultures and multiple different looks and multiple different personalities. Like me, my ancestry is multicultural. I'm Cherokee, I'm Italian, I'm also, I got some ancestors that come from Punjabi, from India, and I'm a direct descendant. Some of my ancestors come from Africa and Egypt. And Egypt's in Africa, by the way. I'm multicultural. I'm everything all built into one. There's a lot of us that are multicultural, but act like we're one race. I meant one culture. Because we are of one race. Born in different places with different skin tones. That's my view on it. We're all a beautiful painting, a work of art. We need color, we need differences. That's what helps us shape us and mold us into something better. But if we go back, we cannot grow, we shrink. And then we'll be digressing into something dumber. And we will destroy ourselves. We have the possibility of hurting ourselves more than helping ourselves right now. But we need to turn that around. Said we because I include myself. Because I'm just as guilty as hurt myself. Okay, I'm going to try to clock in. It's 10 minutes till. I'm trying. I got 9 minutes. I'm trying to launch it. Okay. Here it is. Okay. Okay, I'm doing it. Yay! Now we gotta wait. It's gonna work. So we'll begin shortly. I'm trying to be as specific and be as clear as I can. How many of y'all have gotten messages from people who are just doing the porn thing and sending explicit messages that you have to go under the request and delete them? They're hidden requests.
Hey guys, this is just a friendly reminder
I do have a little bit of green and teal on. I just noticed. I like my outfit. It's comfortable. It should start soon. We got 5 minutes. Or you got like a Batman bucket thing, and it's cooler than the light for the AMC's even the anniversary. They got a bat light for a bucket, and I got one of the kittens, the Flurkins. I got the orange and white of all things. And I got the bucket as the egg and the drink can as the cat. And I'm saving that because it's so cute. And the Batman head. And then they're going to have a light bucket. And I don't tend to use them for that purpose. I tend to collect it. Woohoo. This is the first time I'm trying this out. And I'm glad I got to get it to work on the get go, because I might do more of these if it helps. I hope it helps, but it's doing something. You know, my mom won a prize for going to a bingo with because we had a guy we kept. He, that's Kingdom. That's was not all there, but he had to be put in the nursing home. And she and Ronnie went and played bingo the other night, and she won the big prize. It was a $35 pedicure. She don't like anyone messing with her feet. She says she gave it to me, and I need it. I needed one done. Some things happen. Some good things happen, and Ronnie won, and Kenny won $1. Some good things do happen. They may be small, but they happen. And life does work out. We just gotta have hope. They make out, oh, hope's a crutch. No. Hope is a powerful thing to have. Even the Lantern Corps had a hope. Has a corps that's dedicated to hope. I mean, come on, and it's blue. Okay, it's 8:30. And still waiting for host to start the webinar. Let me restart. Still there. Says it's waiting on the world to change. The world can't change unless we do. So we can't wait for just everyone to change. We got to start with ourselves, right? how I view it. And here it comes. I can't listen to it. I can't hear you. I can't hear them.
We don't chat. Sitting at this very desk and get ready for the calls. Are always busy, and you guys, we have to stay fed and hydrated. And I get a call that says no caller ID, so I thought maybe it was one of the speakers from tonight. So I pick it up, and it was the second gentleman, and he told me that he and the vice president are so proud of all the money, the awareness, the organizing, all the things. Excited to see us keep going and keep doing this, keep working until we win this together. And with a mouthful of turkey, I was just like, thank you, dog. And he was so wonderful and so kind. And I just had to open with that, because not only did that happen because of all of you, his message was clear that showing up, donating, working, posting, putting our all into this election is making a difference. So I just want you all to know people are paying to you. That leads me, that story leads me right into our theme tonight, which is telling a personal story, much like the one I just told, in order to motivate, persuade voters, and impact this election. So in the last couple, so once you get up the courage to do it, what are you supposed to say? Are you supposed to know everything? Are you supposed to know every policy? And the answer is no. You don't need to know everything. The main thing you need to know is what you know best, and that's your own story. You need to know why you are voting for Kamala Harris. You need to know why her policies and values are going to make your life better, safer, and freer. And you do know that. So tell people that. And before we get fully into the nitty-gritty how-tos, if you can't tell from the bags under my eyes, we've had a busy week last week. We all got together in my hometown of Chicago. We had a little convention. And here to recap with me is our favorite legacy media, is a Peabody, Gracie, Emmy Award, CNN. And she joined us last time to talk about what to expect during the convention. So now we're going to kind of bookend this. And Jessica, it's nice to see you outside of the United Center. Welcome back.
Hi, great to see you too. What a week.
What a week. How are you feeling?
I am like riding high. That was such an exciting convention. And I have to say, I've been to, I think, 6 conventions. I've never been to one quite like that. I said it felt like people were on political ecstasy. They were just so excited every day. And it
felt like a Taylor Swift concert. People were so happy to be there, being like so kind to each other. It was such a vibe. 6 conventions is a lot of conventions. I don't know how you do it. I literally can't imagine. I hope it's like childbirth and I forget how like exhausting and tiring that was.
Yes.
4 years from now, and I'll just block it out. But given that you've been to so many conventions, this one in particular, what stood out to you? Personal stories that really shine, like learning more about Kamala's life. What made this one different?
I think, first of all, what I just said, I mean, people were literally walking up to one another going like out of nowhere, your hair looks great. Oh my gosh, that's such a great outfit. They'd scream across to strangers because everybody was just on this there was this ebullient feeling. But I want to talk about specifically what you mentioned, which was how they introduced Kamala Harris. There is so much we could say. But I thought in the theme of storytelling, it's important to note what they did. And they did something that's very hard and made it seem simple. Throughout the convention, they talked a lot about her background, right? You heard them talk about her as a fighter and a protector. She defended her friends when she was in elementary school and high school. She became this prosecutor who fought for justice and stood up for the people, right? That was a constant theme, and it constantly said fighter and protector. And then on the flip side, they talked about her as part of a very modern family, right? She was raised by a mother, but then a lot of extended family members took care of her too, sort of aunties. Mm-hmm. And then she acted as an aunt to her nieces, who you saw quite prominently, and her stepkids, right? And it was very, very cute. And all this was done through storytelling. But collectively, what it did is it painted a portrait of her almost as America's fierce auntie in a way. And why I think that's so brilliant is because it unpacks the double bind women politicians get caught in, which is that if you remember Hillary, she was either likable or strong. And the more you were one, the less you were of another, and they were in tension. And an auntie is a strong, fierce woman who also is fiercely protective of her brood. Her strength feeds her likability and love. And so they worked around that terrible problem that has felled so many other women. And they did it so beautifully through storytelling.
It was masterful. It really was. It was a beautifully produced first did our kind of like what to expect. The convention was meant to be a well-produced party. So did it succeed at not just hearing other people's stories, and like those who have been impacted by Kamala as a prosecutor, those who have been impacted by gun violence? What kind of hit the mark for you? What did you think about the whole production value, everything?
Well, the production value was like A+++, right? It was like Grammy level. And there's going to be griping. Some people didn't like that things went late, beyond prime time, whatever. They did what they set out to accomplish, which was, I'd said before, introduce the candidates. We talked about that. They did that. Unite the party. They really did. If you think about how big of a tent they constructed, you had Bernie Sanders and AOC on the same stage as J.B. Pritzker, a billionaire. And they were all basically singing from the same book. So that's very hard to do. They spoke to undecided voters and they drove the message, and they did it really through a lot of the stories that we all remember, like Hadley, I think her name was Hadley Gamble, or the woman who had, they told the stories of women who had medical complications because of the Dobbs decision. They couldn't get medical treatment, and it became such such a horrific story that other local news channels picked up on these stories and told them to local markets. You saw it all over social media. So the issues and values that this ticket is driving broke through, both through creators who were there and also through traditional media, in addition to people who are watching the convention. That's a home run.
It's a home run. And now that you mentioned it, because there were all these positive things, I think I love politics because I love drama and I love like watching Bravo, former sorority girl. So let's talk about the drama. Let's talk about the creators versus legacy media. There were a couple New York Times articles, lots of press on creators versus media access, treatment, people's roles. The press were calling them, they're just cheerleaders for Kamala. Of course, creators have that it's sometimes they talk too much noise and too much negative when maybe it isn't there. So let's get into the drama.
So yes, this became a bit of a bitch, like a Nazi fest, if you want. They for the first time ever, this campaign credentialed creators to attend as individual people who could cover the event. That meant I went as a creator. I started my career as a journalist, but I'm a journalist creator. So they credentialed me. I got to go on what they called the blue carpet, and they gave us access to some surrogates. But some creators got to interview Vice President Harris. And this happened at the same time that, press has been peeved because she hasn't done a sit-down interview. She will tomorrow with Dana, but she hasn't until now. So there was this double reality where the press felt annoyed that they don't have the access they used to, and then extra threatened because these creators were getting additional access. Look, from a strategic point of view, very smart for the campaign. Creators have this enormously personal connection with an audience, and it's a relationship of trust. If you look at some of this data, it shows people who follow creators, 40% of the people feel they know a creator as well as a member of their own family. So when you talk about trust, it's a great way to drive trust. And deliver a message, and you get around the media filter. On the other hand, for those of you who are sort of assessing how do you get your information, I firmly believe it's great to follow creators, and it's important to also follow members of the media you trust, because they get a bigger perspective. It's an anecdotal point of view. It's a holistic institutional point of view.
It's like creators.
And this fight's not ending. Yeah.
Yes. No, it'll continue. I'm here for the drama, eating the popcorn. It's kind of like creators know their audience best because they do have these parasocial relationships, which is very true. I feel like I know you. I followed you for years. When I saw you in the lobby of a hotel, I hugged you. But we'd never met. It was
so
weird.
Nice to meet you.
It was great to meet you too. But I do feel like people have that connection with people that they follow online. But it is so important to listen to voices that have a more global perspective, that have a more of a historical perspective. So I think the answer is we need both, and I think you get that across. So we had a little break from while at this convention from watching Trump be Trump, because we were kind of focused on all the amazing stories being put out of this convention. While our attention was away, or when we bothered to look back, are they okay? Like, what is going on in that campaign? Like,
that I can't answer. I can tell you what they're up to, but that is a big unknown. Let's see what has happened on the Trump side since. I mean, it's a lot of noise, but these days the noise is the news. So RFK endorsed. We don't know how much of a difference that'll make yet. There's an analysis that maybe RFK's voters are anti-institution, anti-authority, and so wouldn't back Trump. We'll see. Tulsi Gabbard has joined as a surrogate. Let's see, an aide. There was recently a scuffle this week at Arlington Cemetery when Trump went for a photo op. They broke some rules and took photos where they're not meant to. That's become a thing. Trump said today that he thinks California voted for him. He won. It just was hidden. He said this in an interview with Dr. Phil. I guess he also, I didn't see this, but posted a crude sexual remark about Vice President Harris. J.D. Vance, more comments surfaced about J.D. Vance having trouble with women who don't have kids. This seems to be a very prominent theme for him. But overall, they're mocking Harris for not putting out more policy and not sitting down with legacy journalists, while they are also not putting out a lot of policy and not sitting down with legacy journalists.
classic. So would you say this was the convention, as we wrap up here, was it a moment, or is this enough momentum? Was this like a match that lit a fire that's now going to go burn?
That's a great question. So here's the way I think about this and where we are. The campaign took off like a rocket. It just was like perfection from a campaign strategy perspective. It's now reached orbit, and it needs more energy and like sort of fuel to keep traveling. How did they get that fuel? They do some interviews with the press. She's sitting down with Dana Bash tomorrow. They do a debate. Obviously, I'm pretty sure that'll happen. And then they have to keep getting out there with little bits of policy, and then they rely on their field troops. Everybody who's door knocking, holding house parties, posting on social media to continue to generate the energy and momentum to ensure that what was a moment turns into a movement. You also are looking at Trump and seeing if his sort of dysfunctional campaign remains dysfunctional. Everything I just said suggests it is. So then the question is, you have to trust the candidates to continue with a successful campaign strategy. And it's really a question is, do the troops get out there and do that door knocking and do everything they can do to keep that energy high and keep that rocket ship going?
Yeah, and we are the troops, and we're ready to do it. Well, thank you so much, Jessica. I would love to have you back for another check-in throughout the campaign. Really appreciate you being here. So great to meet you at the convention, and thanks for the update.
Thanks to everybody.
All right. I am so excited to welcome our next guest, who is now going to teach us the ins and outs, the nitty-gritty of crafting our personal story. Tamara Bay is the author of Permission to Speak, which is a love letter to anyone who is about to open their mouth. It's also a #1 bestseller in women and business and public speaking. Her work on reimagining what power sounds like has been featured everywhere from Time and the New York Times to Forbes, Glamour, Vanity Fair, CBS Morning, Sunday Morning, Fast Company, Deepak Chopra. You're everywhere, Tamara. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Hi.
Hi.
So I get to talk about stories. I'm going to jump in by saying why. Why do we keep focusing on stories as a way to persuade people, right? I'm going to give 3 reasons, even though, stories are as old as humanity. So there's lots of reasons. But here's 3. 1, stories make facts stick. If you tell a story with even the tiniest amount of detail, I was about to get into my old Volvo station wagon, my blue Volvo station wagon in front of my apartment in Brooklyn. Science will tell us that the same brain activity in my mind is now matched in your mind. And if we add a tiny bit of emotional content to that, I was getting into my old blue Volvo station wagon and I felt like my heart was going to break. It will stick even better. And what that means is that our memories become other people's memories. They will remember us telling that story. So that's 1. 2, real things that happen to you are real. So somebody can disagree with your conclusion. They can disagree with what you did. They can wish that it wasn't true, but true things are true. And your stories belong to you, and they always will. And the 3rd thing I want to reference is, that like old high school teacher, English teacher lesson of show, don't tell. That's not just because when you show, we get these images. It's that when you show instead of tell, by which I mean when you storytell, showing is storytelling, about particularly a moment, honing in on a moment when maybe you had an aha and you made a decision. You are more revealing of your character and of your values than telling somebody these are my values. When you show us in a story, we believe you. And for many of us, there is a counter narrative in our own head that goes something like, cool. I believe you. Yay, storytelling. I'm bad at stories. Or what if my story is too small, too boring, too irrelevant, too braggy, too roundabout? So I just really want to name that I think the hero's journey has done a number on all of us. And the idea of the hero's journey, this sort of cultural myth of the hero's journey, is that stories have to be epic. They have to be questy. There's like a good versus evil scenario. There's violence, and stories with a hero's journey bent tend to star men. And although we can look at this from a safe distance and critique it, the reality is that when it's our chance to tell a story, we are much more likely to critique ourselves. So I want to offer an invitation that when any of us chooses to change our own story about how to tell stories, to decide our story is worth telling, we are being an activist in that moment. That idea that our story isn't good enough, that idea is outdated. It does not belong to us, and it does not serve us, and it does not serve Kamala Harris, and it does not serve the United States of America. So instead, I want to offer one of my favorite quotes about storytelling. Ishiguro, he's a novelist who won the Nobel for literature, and he said when he was thinking about turning points in his life, he realized a pattern. He said, often they are small, scruffy moments. They are quiet, private sparks of revelation. I've come to think of these as scruffies. Often, and you can think about this for yourself, right? Often they are an aha in the shower, or a conversation with a friend that just wouldn't leave us, or a moment that we found ourselves saying something surprisingly wise to our child, or maybe the moment you decided that you definitely were going to be voting for Kamala Harris, or maybe the moment you decided you definitely are going to get off the sidelines and work for her more than you ever have before, right? The little moment, the spark of revelation. The old hero's journey tells us that's not worthy of a story. And we're here to say, yeah, it is. That our tiny moments of, oh, matter. They matter to us, they matter to our kids, they matter to our friends, they matter to strangers. And a lot of the best moments at the convention were people talking about tiny moments and what they did next. So I'm going to talk about how to put our scruffies, how to collect our scruffies, and how to put them into a simple structure. But first, I'm going to tell a story for context. The summer of 2018, I was in Washington, D.C. for the summer. I got to coach Gal Gadot on Wonder Woman 2. So I have this background as a dialect coach in Hollywood, which means like telling movie stars what to do with their tongues, which meant that I got to work with Gal, but which also meant that for anybody who's seen the movie, a lot of the DC sequences were flying sequences and stunt work, and there were no sounds coming out of her mouth, and I had literally nothing to do. And that summer, 2018, you may recall, we were 2 years into our former president's term. We were resisting in a lot of ways. We were going to protests, we were writing postcards, and then that summer, we started getting inundated with the pictures of kids who were being separated from their parents at the border. And my activist friends were burning out. I felt like I was burning out. And we were hurtling towards this midterm, this first chance to change the narrative in the country. And we were all just like fritzed. And in the midst of that, I got this call from moveon.org. A friend had suggested me, they were looking for people to jump in pro bono and coach all these first-time female candidates who ended up becoming the blue wave, but we didn't know that at the time, right? We just knew like lots of women running for office for the first time didn't totally know what they were doing. Or their policy work was great, but they didn't know how to do a stump speech. And I had never helped on this sort of thing before, but I was like, yes, please. And I dove in and I had all these Zoom dates with all these women who are running for office for the first time. And I discovered, oh my God, they were so magnificent. Like they were literally who we want to have represent us. But they had so much trouble, every single one of them, translating their magnificence to the mic. And I realized, oh my gosh, helping them with that is my superpower. It's my calling. And it led to a podcast on iHeartRadio and a book with Penguin Random House, and this moment that I'm here with you. So I tell that story as a model of what I'm about to share in terms of actually a super simple structure. 1, and by the way, you're going to get a cheat sheet on this. I think it's maybe in the chat. 1, as you begin to think about your scruffies, a moment when something happened and you did something. The first rule is figure out just how little, not how much, how little needs to be shared for context to set it up. Where were you? What was your emotional state? There's a version of that story I just told where I'm like, it was really hot because humidity in DC, and I had all these days off from set, and I was like wandering on these beautiful old cobblestone streets listening to Braving the Wilderness by Brene Brown and sobbing, right? But you didn't actually need all of that. You maybe already like saw it in your mind's eye without me even saying it, right? So the least amount of information necessary to set up where you were. I was on the operating table about to get a C-section, and I found myself thinking, instead of, oh my God, I can't wait to meet my baby, oh my God, thank God there's some OBGYNs who still work here despite the draconian abortion laws, right? That's a moment. Oh, wow, that was a thought I had. So the first thing is the setup. The second is the thought. It can be an aha. It can be a call, right? That's when Doug Emhoff called me, right? It can be a moment in time that just lands. And then the third thing is what you did next. Setup, least amount necessary. Aha, you can define this creatively, right? Storytelling is an art, not a science. So for me, it was either the moment I got the call for move on, or it was the moment that I realized, oh my God, this is what I should be doing with my life, right? Probably the second one's juicier, but there you go. So setup, moment, what you did next. And I just want to offer that Kamala did this beautifully in her acceptance speech when she talked about the story of when she was in high school, her friend was acting really weird, and she asked over and over what was wrong until the friend said that she was being abused. And Kamala went, oh my God, you're coming home with me. And then she made it happen in less than a week. As you can see, these are the moments that reveal our character and reveal our values. And the thing about revealing our character and our values is that that is what builds trust. And trust is the most valuable currency on earth. Shannon, I know you wanted to ask me some questions.
Samara, I love you and I love your work. I really do. And I think one of the first things I said to you when we met was that if I had known starting Moms Demand Action would involve public speaking, I would not have done it because I was so terrified. So what do you to say to anyone who's watching who has those same fears? Maybe they're too scared or shy or nervous. What advice would you give them?
Well, first of all, let's just all like take a breath for what you just said, because the amount of work and the amount of impact you have made is a great example of what happens, right? When we just give ourselves permission to get beyond that fear that we're going to mess it up and do the thing anyway. You know, the nerves thing, right? Everyone feels nerves. Nerves are on some level body activation. They're just sparkles, body sparkles. And when I think about nerves, I'm going to say, you know, Glennon Doyle was on our first call, and maybe she's here now. I, along with surely many of you, read Untamed in the first few months of the pandemic. And I was really struck. I had just sold my book, but I hadn't written it yet. Instead, I was reading Untamed. And I was really struck with the fact that the spirit of that book, the idea that it's all too easy to abandon ourselves, that it is our opportunity to claim our wild and to discover the nurture, really, the version of ourself before the world told us how to be. That kind of self-love really hits the fan when we have the opportunity to speak in public, especially to tell a story, especially to speak on our own convictions, the kind of things that our mothers and our grandmothers and our great-grandmothers were not allowed to do. And here we are breaking stigma. So when we feel nerves, when we feel body sparkles, we get to decide intentionally, is this fear because I'm not ready, I'm not good enough? Or is this love because I'm about to talk about something that I care about, and I'm going to talk about it in such a way that that care spreads?
Oh, I love that advice. Samara, thank you so much for joining us tonight. So grateful for you and your storytelling advice, and also for your book. Thank you.
My pleasure. And also, listen, I want to say that when the body nerves are happening, there is a little short warm up, and I wrote it down for everybody in that cheat sheet. So you really have like, do this, do this, do this. And if you don't do this before you go out on stage or before you talk to people, you're just not like setting yourself up for success. And we should all be setting ourselves up for success.
Love it. Thank you.
Thanks. We're all going to do that exercise before we knock doors. Shake out all the sparkles and get ready to talk about this ticket. Thank you so much, Samara. I am so delighted to welcome our next guest, attorney, multi-platform journalist, ABC News legal analyst, and co-host of The View, Sunny Hostin. Sunny, not only have you had an incredibly impactful career even before your time on The View, I believe that your show plays a vitally important role in our society. It's a high-profile place where people see intelligent women expressing their beliefs, fighting for their convictions, using their stories to change people's hearts and minds. So I couldn't think of a better person to talk about the importance of storytelling tonight. Sunny, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm just really so honored to have been invited here. I was on that first call with Win with Black Women, where we sort of kind of broke the internet and we were trying to get on the Zoom, and it was 44,000 women. And then I saw, Win with White Women come on, and there's like $8 million within, within 24 hours or 48 hours. And I'm just so honored to be part of what I don't think is a moment. I think it is a movement. And I love this theme of storytelling because most people do see me on The View. Excuse all the frizzy hair. I'm sitting outside and it is really brutal here in New York today. But, this theme of storytelling is so important because I think women in particular are what I call the griots of our family. We're the ones that sort of take pictures of the kids and we make sure that everyone gets together. And in many families, we're the ones that get our husbands to vote and our sons to vote and our daughters to vote. And all about this theme of telling, and in particular, which I think is really important. Fine. I'm not cooking tonight. Yes? Oh, okay. Yes, I will. Thank you so much. Have a good night. Sorry, everyone. Real life happening. So, I for me, people see The View, and it's 3 million people that watch the show. A lot of women, about 60% women, about 40% men, believe it or not. And we talk about things that you're not supposed to talk about, right? We talk about race, we talk about politics, we talk about religion, and we tell stories about ourselves. And I'm known as the voice of reason, and I'm known as this bold, bold person. But my story is that I am bold by necessity, if that makes any sense. I'm actually quite introverted. I always wanted to be a storyteller, but I wanted to tell other people's stories. I certainly didn't want to speak about myself. I'm always uncomfortable speaking about myself. I was sort of this nerd, and my parents really are the revolutionaries in our family. You have a white woman that married a black guy a year after the Supreme Court said they could be married, a year after the Loving decision in 1968. And so they were given that freedom to love who they loved and get married. And I'm sort of the result of that. And I grew up as a nerd, as a book nerd, absolutely. But knowing that there were just certain, I was treated differently by certain people. And so my boldness didn't exist. I didn't have a voice. I didn't want to talk about how people were treating me and about how I was being treated differently. I didn't want to speak up for the voiceless, but I did want to tell stories. I really wanted to be a writer. And what my mother told me was, look at you. No one really looks like you. Barbara Walters doesn't look like you. There aren't people on television that look like you. And so I decided, much like Kamala Harris, to take what was considered a safer route, which was to go to law school. And I was very lucky because education in my life became the great equalizer, even though I'm a kid from the South Bronx projects, because my parents weren't allowed to get housing in certain places as an interracial couple. I got into some pretty good schools. And as a lifelong Catholic, I went to Catholic school my entire life, and I even went to Notre Dame Law School, Catholic Law School. And what I will tell you is that I finally decided to follow my dream, which was to tell other people's stories. And I got very, very lucky. I think it's opportunity meeting preparation, of course. And I had a journalism degree by that time. But I'd had my first child, which was a very difficult pregnancy. It was an IVF pregnancy, and I was on bed rest for over 7 months. And they told me I had a 1 in 4 chance of living. He's a senior at Harvard. He's just fine, but it was very, very difficult. And I remember thinking when I had him, there must be other women going through this. Why aren't we talking about these things? And I've got to follow my dream, even if people don't understand what that is. And even if my mother doesn't understand what that is, even if my father doesn't understand what that is, and even if I don't look like other people. And I started sort of moonlighting and freelancing, and Jessica Yellen, who we've had on, I worked with her at CNN sort of as a contributor. And ultimately I started working at a really late night show from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. And who would think it? But Whoopi Goldberg happens to be an insomniac, and this was one of her favorite shows. And she called Barbara Walters and said, there's this woman, she's on ABC at 2:30 in the morning. She's doing something called In the Mix on a show. It's a lot like The View. You should give her a shot. And that's really how I got on The View. And when I first started auditioning, Bill Getty, who was the executive producer at the time, told me, my goodness, you're looking like you're watching The View rather than being on The View. You are here to give voice to your particular perspective. And he told me, be bold. My good friend Don Lemon watched my first couple of auditions because we worked at CNN together. And he reached out to me and he said, Sonny, lean in. I know that you have this voice. And I will tell you, that is how I sort of found my voice. And I started speaking louder and stronger, and I felt better, and I felt more like myself. I felt free. And so what I would say about storytelling is that we all have stories. And now is the time to tell our stories, and tell our stories to our families, to our friends, to people who may not agree with you. I don't think we get it right all the time on The View, but I think Barbara Walters had an incredible vision of 5 women from 5 different generations. And believe it or not, we do have that. Someone in her 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 80s. Joy Behar is going to be upset that I just told everyone that she's in her 80s, but she is. She's 81 and one of my dearest friends. And she had this vision that women could talk about politics, that women could talk about those issues that mean something to us, that women could talk about our children, that women could talk about the journey of motherhood, that women could talk about how we're tired of having our kids participate in active shooter drills, how we are tired of men telling us what we can and cannot do with our bodies. And I was saying this to the group earlier before we went live, that, I'm a Catholic. And so I may not believe in some of the same things that other people believe in, but I certainly, as a lawyer, believe that the government has no business in our bedrooms, has no business telling people who they can marry and who they cannot, telling women what they can do with their bodies. I firmly believe in a separation between church and state. And I was able to find my voice in large part because of my own story. And so I think the other thing that I just want to say quickly, because I know I don't have a lot of time, I did grow up with a mother that is Spanish from Spain, Jewish, and Puerto Rican. So it's an interesting mix, right? But she's blonde and green-eyed. And my father's a Black guy from Augusta, Georgia, who grew up in the segregated South. And what I was able to observe was my mother had, because of how she presented, and because people didn't know I was her daughter, and because people didn't know she was married to some Black guy from Augusta, Georgia, she had this economic, political privilege and power that I still don't have. And people would say things to her, and she would get into rooms that I couldn't get into, and sometimes I probably still can't get into. And so what I say to the women on this call is, please, even if your family members don't agree with you, tell them your story. Tell them why you're voting for Kamala. Tell them what you believe in. Tell them that home ownership is important to you. Tell them that a good education is important to you. Tell them that you're in this sandwich generation like I am, that I take care of my mother and I have 2 kids in college. Tell them that your reproductive health rights mean a lot to you, and that you think that these freedoms are being taken away from you. And I have people on one side of my family that are definitely voting for Trump, and I give them hell, and I do what I do on The View, and I challenge them, and I challenge their positions, because we have to use our voices and our stories to make sure that we are heard, and to make sure that we never go back to times when we had to have men co-sign our bank accounts or co-sign our credit cards.
We're not going back.
We're not going back. And so I'm just here to say that there is a certain amount of power and privilege that so many of you have, and I just hope that you will use it for the common good, because it is so important. We are at a time when our democracy, and this sounds contrite and it sounds like it's not real, but I'm telling you, I was at the DNC as well. I was in the chair's suite. Our democracy is at stake, and we all have a story to tell, and we've got to get involved. We must.
I love it. Thank you, Sunny. And I'm going to have you stick around, because it's kind of my dream to be a View co-host, and we're basically going to have like a little mini View right here on Women Wednesday. Sunny is going to be interviewing our next guest, Pamela Adlon, who's an Emmy Award-winning actress, writer, and director, and her new movie Babes is a hilarious, raw, unfiltered look at pregnancy and motherhood, and it should be required viewing for every straight, cis, male Republican trying to make laws about our vaginas. So take it away, Sunny and Pamela.
Yes. Well, I have to say, Pamela, hello. I did interview you on The View. You know I love this movie, Babes. I forced my husband and his best friend, who can tend to be a bit sexist sometimes, although he has 3 children, watch your movie. And while it's not the first movie, it's not your first piece of work, but it's the first feature film, I believe, that you've directed. It is an unvarnished look at family, at pregnancy, at the journey of motherhood, at unconventional families. And my husband thought it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. I've seen it 3 times now. My husband's friend, I think, is still traumatized by it. So he's one of those Republican guys that really needs to see it again and again and again. So please tell me why you chose, after doing Better Things, or while doing Better Things, which of course has this sort of abortion thread as well in it. So you're tackling these issues over and over again. Why Babes? Why now?
So anyway, I as well am honored to be here. I think what you guys are doing, the Indivisibles, and I like Jessica Yellen, I mean, Samara, I'm like, who are these women? You're blowing my mind. Thank you for everybody to be part of this. The way I tell stories has always been, I say that I'm putting kale in the chocolate milkshake. I don't want to hit people over the head. I want the message to be in the way I work and the way I live. And so the way I tell stories is it's all packed in there. It's like we talk about culture, we talk about gender, we talk about sexuality, we talk about women's reproductive rights, making shooting babes in the summer of 2022, right when Roe was repealed, was unbelievable. And my first thought was, I don't want this to be weaponized because she decides to have the baby. I was concerned about that. And I feel that, it's like, this is very near and dear to me because I have a brother, and I remember being in Union Square in New York City when we were shooting the movie, and somebody was on a soapbox and he was doing the thing with the bullhorn, talking about how Jesus didn't want anybody to have a. And I was like, I feel strong right now. I feel like I could engage in a gentle conversation without freaking out. And I really, really wanted to have an exchange with him. And I talked to him about how my mother had an abortion in the 50s in New York City. And it was like on a dining table, literally. She was not, my mother, English, she came to America, didn't know anybody. And she was not ready, but she knew she wanted to have kids. And so I was engaging with this guy in this conversation, and I said, my mother wasn't ready, and she made a choice. Then he became obsessed with the abortion that my mother had, and that could have been your other brother or sister. And I was like, girl, bye. I just couldn't. I feel like when you are, and I know because I spoke to Liz about this, I am a professional storyteller. And is important for me to be able to say hard things with care. And when you discuss things that are hard or difficult and you put it in the package of true life, like what Samara was saying about details, details that make it personal. So and also when you guys were talking about how people can be nervous about telling their story, I have a very dear friend who's a gay man. He's my age, we're in our 50s, and he comes from like someplace in the Midwest. He's one of 10 kids, and he's the only gay one, and they are all super religious. And he didn't get to speak to anybody for years. Now, one of his sisters is ill. The family all came together. And he is staunchly, like you, Sonny, Catholic. Yeah. And he has faith. And he's a gay man. And none of his family wanted to talk to him about that. And he said, I feel like I want my story to be told. And so he wanted to write a children's book about how they all came together and finally got passed. And I feel like, as somebody who does have Republicans in my family, we all do, how important it is to engage healthfully in a non-extreme way, and to have the strength to tell your story and help other people tell their stories, and help people because, Liz was telling me about swing states and everything. And people are like, I don't want to vote. It's not going to matter. And all of these things. What we can do is make sure that the young people are registered properly. I was kicked off of my voting registration, and I didn't even know. And I've been voting from the same place 25 years. Check your voting registration, check everything so you're not surprised on the day. And help people if they want to be a door knocker, they want to help because people are so energized. They just need a hand. Use Samara's tips, and that's it. God bless us.
Thank you, ladies. That That was powerful. Thank you, Sunny. Thanks for having a little like view light with us here tonight. You both have
Yes.
powerful stories and are so effective at telling them to move people. And it's exactly what you said, what Samara said. There's science behind this. You connect with people over this, and it makes them hear you, and it makes them tell their story, and it changes hearts and minds. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks, ladies.
Thank you.
Our next guest is Danica Rome, a distinguished member of the Virginia State Senate representing the 13th District. She made history in 2017 as the first openly transgender person elected to a state legislature in the United States. She's known for her advocacy on issues such as transportation, education, LGBTQ+ rights. She has become a prominent voice for progressive change in Virginia. And not only does she have a compelling personal story, but what is most remarkable about her is her commitment to inclusive policy making, community engagement. Danica, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you so much, Liz. I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity. Thank you especially to Shannon, who invited me to be here. Thank you all for tuning in as well. And so just to get down to it, my name is Danica Rome. I'm grateful to serve the people of the 30th District of the Senate of Virginia, and that includes the cities of Manassas and Manassas Park, as well as Western Prince William County. And you were just hearing from Sunny. I spent 15 years in Catholic schools myself, baptized, confirmed, whole 9 yards. But if you know my story, as you were just hearing, it's probably because I'm the first unseated trans state legislator in the country. And that dates back to 2017 when I unseated the self-described chief homophobe of Virginia. And he had been in office for 26 years, over 13 terms from the time I was 7 years old. And so, I launched that campaign when I was 32, won at 33, got sworn in. And since then, we've now passed 51 of my bills into law, all with bipartisan support, including 14 bills to feed hungry kids. And in fact, I was the only Democrat in the state Senate this year who didn't get a bill vetoed. So actually, did pretty decent there. But, in order to get to a place where I'm able to tout accomplishments, where I'm able to kept campaign promises like expanding Medicaid to 700,000 people, securing, $68 million, fixed Route 28, and of course, making sure that we're feeding hungry kids. It's taken me to make sure that I'm actually tapping into not only my public policy acumen that came from being a long-time local news reporter, but it also came from being willing to be vulnerable enough to be visible, to tell my story, because you have to remember, people connect with stories. Human beings are storytellers. We can recite all the facts, figures, data in the world, but you got to personalize it. You've got to be able to connect with people. And so, right now, when we hear about, Vice President Kamala Harris, one of the words we hear about her the most is that she's fearless, right? We hear not all the statistician, sort of stuff that actually Elizabeth Warren really tried to make her brand in 2020, but we hear just, that she stands up for people who need help. Like that story that we were hearing at the DNC about how when she was a little girl and she confronted the playground bully. And, I love that story because 20 years ago, I wasn't fearless. I was scared of people finding out who I really was, because then I'd be outed, I could be attacked, or even worse, like what happened to Gwen Rahu. And she was killed for simply existing as a trans woman in America in 2002. It's really scary. And, when I came home from college once, 2004, I remember driving out to DuPont Circle in DC. I'd do a park on P Street. I'd step out of the car in my heels and skirt, and I would keep my head down. And I'd keep my hair over my face, and I'd quickly walk across the bridge. I'd pass the gas station on the right, and I'd make a beeline over to the gay club called Apex. And I was just constantly thinking inside, please don't let anyone recognize me. Please don't let anyone know. Please don't let anyone know. Please don't let anyone know. And meanwhile, that same year that I was 20 years old, just trying to exist, across the country on the West Coast, there was a newly elected district attorney who stepped out of a car by City Hall after the mayor of San Francisco had declared that marriage equality was law of the land. And she walked in, she held her head high, and Kamala Harris asked, "What can I do to help?" Next thing you know, she was officiating weddings for same-sex couples. And she was doing it with the very joy that is the hallmark and cornerstone of her campaign today. Kamala Harris supported people like me before it was popular, before it was easy, and then because it was right. She did it without even knowing who I was. And she was doing it because she wanted to help. Now, 9 years after that, 2013 going into 2014, New Year's Eve, I was 4 weeks into hormone replacement therapy. I went out to a party with a couple of friends. And as I walked through the door of this bar where we were all hanging out that night, I kept my hair down. I walked in, just kind of going like this again. And it was just like I did before. I was so nervous. And so I remember I was in the restroom, and this woman with an Irish accent, she spots me and she walks over and she asked me if I was trans. And I looked at the floor and I just kind of sheepishly said, yeah. And she said, oh, I could tell, not for what I wore or what I said, because I lacked confidence. And she was telling me to keep my chin up because I belonged there. Then 6 years after that, it's now 2019, I was in LA at an HRC gala, and I met Kamala Harris. For me as a state legislator, as a member of the House of Delegates at the time, and for her as a United States Senator. And you know what she told me? She walked up and she told me to keep my shoulders down, keep my chin up. And she told me, you are exactly where you're meant to be. And here's the thing, friends. I am exactly where I'm meant to be. And that's a right here with you all tonight, with the Women for Harris who are organizing and kicking some butt right here. And I'm never going to hide my face in fear again, because I'm not going back. We are not going back. And we're sure as hell not going back to an ungrateful Trump administration who was kicking transgender service members out of the military, even though those very troops showed more courage defending and serving our country in Afghanistan than their then commander-in-chief ever did or ever could. My friends, our friends are on the ballot for the White House this fall with Vice President Harris and with Governor Walz. These are friends who want us to succeed because of who we are, not despite it, and not for what discriminatory politicians tell us we're supposed to be. You be you better than anyone else ever could, because you're the only one who ever can. So let's go and big this fall. Thanks so much.
Let's go in big. Thank you. I mean, I like myself as like the user experience on these calls, and the user experience is sobbing during that. So thank you, Danica. That was so powerful. Thank you for your bravery. Thank you for being who you are unapologetically. And to close us out this evening, I'd like to welcome Beto O'Rourke, an amazing advocate, a former U.S. Congressman representing Texas's 16th Congressional District, a Senate and presidential candidate, a native of El Paso, Texas. He's a champion of progressive issues. And Beto, I still remember where I was when you stood up at that deplorable Uvalde press conference and you told them you were doing nothing. This is on you, and how right you were. And speaking of bravery, your bravery inspires me every day. We are so honored to have you close us out this evening.
Thank you, Liz. Thanks for the invitation to be here. And to Shannon Watts, who originally reached out to me, talk about heroes in the room right now. She is someone who I think has just set the bar on a number of issues, most importantly, just leadership, period. But then when it comes to gun violence and holding people in positions of power accountable for what they do or what they fail to do, she's my model, and I'm just trying to follow her lead. And so I just want to thank all of you for what you're doing. It's amazing, and it's a big part of the reason that so much of America has a smile on its face right now, and that there is joy coursing through the Democratic Party for the first time in a really long time. It's just the power of people who are doing what they can with what they have, where they are, and making a huge difference. A couple of quick thoughts on just the power of storytelling. I come from El Paso, which is the defining border city. We're connected to Ciudad Juarez. There's a community there of 2.5 million people from both sides of the border, speaking English and Spanish, Mexican and American. who come together in the Chihuahuan Desert, in the Rocky Mountains, in the Rio Grande River Valley, and really create something extraordinary and special. A quarter of those with whom I live in El Paso were born in another country, most of them in Mexico. And El Paso, not coincidentally, is one of the safest cities in America, bar none. Not in spite of, but I would argue because of the fact that we are a city of immigrants, that we're connected to Mexico, and that we see this as a source of strength and success. But because El Paso for so long failed so miserably to tell that story that I'm telling you right now about this magical, beautiful, just fucking amazing place on the planet. If you've never visited, I want you to come down. Other people started to tell our story for us. And one of those people in a long line of people who tried to stoke hysteria and anxiety and fear and hatred, even violence about the border, was Donald Trump, who, as you know, made his maiden presidential speech talking about Mexicans sending rapists and criminals to our country and fomenting this invasion. He then began to refer to them as animals, as an infestation. An infestation is a cockroach, it's a rodent, it's something that you want to kill or exterminate. But he was talking about human beings in this way. And he said they're coming through in El Paso and Del Rio and Eagle Pass and the Rio Grande Valley, but really El Paso was front and center. You got kids in cages, you got family separation, you got extraordinary cruelty and brutality, and something far beneath who we are as Americans. That's the power of storytelling and rhetoric. There was a speech that he gave in Florida in 2019 when he was still president. He's talking about this invasion of these Mexicans, these immigrants who are coming to get us. And he said, "What are we going to do?" And someone in the crowd yells out, "Shoot them." And Donald Trump kind of smirks and kind of laughs in consent or assenting to what this person has done. The rest of the audience roars with laughter and approval. As this is going on, there's a troubled young man in North Texas who has ordered an AK-47. His mom, when the weapon arrives at their house, is like, "What the fuck does my son need with an AK-47?" Calls the police in Allen, Texas, and says something's wrong. Because we don't have a red flag law in the state of Texas, the cops say, "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. There's nothing that we can do. You're on your own. Good luck." That troubled young man drives that AK-47 and himself 600 miles from Allen, Texas to El Paso, walks into a Walmart on the last Saturday before the school year starts in 2019, and opens fire on people that he thinks are immigrants, that he's been warned about by Donald Trump, who are coming to invade and take his place as a white man in the state of Texas. That warning exacerbated by our governor and other people in positions of public trust who stoke anxiety and fear, despite the fact that immigrants commit violent crimes at a much lower rate than anyone who was born here. And just because El Paso is one of the safest places on the planet, but you wouldn't know it because Donald Trump told the story, set the stage, and made what happened on that Saturday in El Paso almost inevitable. 23 people were murdered in cold blood in a city that doesn't lose 20 people in a year to violence, gun violence or otherwise. So to me, that was a just incredibly important lesson in storytelling. If we do not tell our story, other people tell our story for us, and really bad things can happen as a result. And so I've made it my mission since then in 2019 to do my best to tell our story, to talk about immigration and the border in a way that is honest and founded in facts and truth, and really also beyond the fear that some people have, explores what is so beautiful and powerful and amazing about our country connecting with the rest of the world, and people who want to come here to make a better life for themselves, and yes, also for this country. And then last thing in my 30 seconds, here's a positive story about storytelling. When I was running for Congress in 2012, long shot, uphill, against the odds battle, going up against an incumbent member of Congress, outspent 5-1. We made it our business to knock on doors every day. And I personally was knocking on doors every day. And so think about this as you're knocking on doors for Harrison Walls. One of the doors I knocked on towards the end of the campaign was a nice older woman who invited me in, brewed me a cup of coffee, had me sit down on the couch, I kid you not, we didn't talk about politics or policy. She told me about her grandson in the Marines, of whom she was so proud, about her daughter, who's a school teacher, who, despite the fact that she has to work a second job, still persists in public education. Probably spent 30 or 40 minutes in her house. And I'm sure my campaign team was like, what the hell is Beto doing? Like, we need him to go knock on more doors or make some fundraising phone calls. But I love talking to this woman. Fast forward to the next week. It's Monday. I'm walking into a diner for breakfast. And this young man stops me and he said, you don't know who I am, but you knocked on my grandmother's door last Thursday. And she had me and my 32 other cousins over for menudo on Sunday. And she made each and every single one of us promise to vote for you in this next election. And so he said, look, Beto, I don't know who you are or anything about you, but you're going to win this election based on our family alone. And for me, that was the power of showing up, listening to people, meeting them where they are, and hearing their stories. There is something incredibly powerful and transcendent in that. So when you're knocking doors for the Harris Walls ticket, and knocking doors is going to be part of the way in which we win this election, make sure that as much as we talk, we also listen as we meet people where they are. That, I think, more than anything else, is going to connect with people and show them the power of Harris and Walls, not just in the policy prescriptions, but in the fact that they care about human beings, that they have a heart, and that they make us happy at the end of the day. So thanks again for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm honored, and I'm looking forward to seeing the great work that you all do between now and Election Day in November.
Thank you, Beto. That was wonderful and such an important reminder. And really the whole point, you hit the nail on the head of why we want you to get out there and tell your story, because we want people to tell back to us and we want to connect over that. And that's how we're going to drive change. That's how we're going to persuade people in this election. So I hope you leave here inspired by these stories, empowered to go tell your own. Next week, we're going to be talking about using those stories to talk to voters. We're going to be talking about phone banking, canvassing, relational organizing. We're going to be role playing. We're going to be demystifying these super important voter engagement activities. And we'll be practicing how to get better at persuading and messaging. And a huge, huge part of that, listening. So if you're ready right now, though, get after it. Here are your battleground states. As a bit of homework for next week, I want you to look at these battleground states and write a list of all the people you know who live in these states. So take a screenshot. We're also going to be sending this out, but get out a notepad, write Arizona, write all the people you know. If you live in one of these states, and that would be hard to write down every person you know, make a list of the people you think might be undecided voters or persuadable Trump voters that live near you that are in your orbit. So make that list. We're dropping tomorrow's storytelling cheat sheet once again in the chat, as well as the Instagram handles of our wonderful speakers. Make sure you sign up for next week. The link to register is also in the chat. And your takeaway tonight, your call to action, I said you'd have a clear call to action. Make that list and go practice your story. Go tell your story at the dinner table, or call a friend, or message your action team and practice telling them your personal story that explains why this election means so much to you and why you're supporting Kamala Harris. And not only is it an effective way to use what you know, but it's damn hard to argue with. It's really hard to argue when somebody lays it all out there. So go tell. It's what women have been doing for centuries, and it's what will save us in November. Good night.
Well, that was something. And Asher, thank you for joining in. And they're right about storytelling. It's like, if they don't have all the facts, they're going to believe anything. So we got to get our stories out there. And I know my state is one of the swing states. And I'm on edge in my state. We do have a Democratic governor. He is not going to return because he's already run his race. In other words, there's going to be a new governor, and I'm hoping it'll be another Democratic because he was really good. And if a Republican gets it and he's a Trumpican, that's bad. That's like going back. We don't need to be going back. It's like Elsa's song, "I'm never going back. The past is in the past. Let it go, let it go." They need to let the past go, because we're not going to go there anymore. You know, we have the power. Vote. I'm trying to get people around me to vote. The attitude is, well, my vote don't count as much. It doesn't matter. Voting is, it does count. It really does count. It does matter because you're voting for somebody who's either going to take my rights away and your rights, or you're voting for somebody who's for democracy, who believes in diversity, who is powerful in her own right, who's a good role model for young women to be. Isn't that who we strive to be as women? Someone powerful, someone outspoken, someone who would stand up to a bully. I think how everyone sees us as a bully needs to be shut away. I think we need to recreate ourselves as empathy, strong, and powerful, and not a bully. U.S. could be amazing and great, but the history isn't great, and a lot of people can't face that. We need to face it in order to grow, instead of trying to pretend it didn't happen to repeat it. I think they are proud that they claim to own people. That's not something to be proud of. Controlling people is nothing to be proud of. We weren't made to be controlled. We were made to be loved, supported. I'll leave it right there. But I'll do some more of these if y'all would like them. If to continue them, I'll do it, because I think this went well tonight. And I got something out of it. They really spoke to me. I mean, I was surprised. I didn't know who was going to be speaking tonight, which I was pleasantly surprised to find out. The speakers, we can do this. Don't worry about a thing, 'cause every little thing is gonna be alright. And this is my niece's birthday, and this is the anniversary of Chadwick Boseman's passing. And it's my nephew Ian, great nephew Ian's birthday. So yes, we can do this. But I don't know how to talk to certain members of my family that I know are dangerous people. Even I would admit to some to stay away because they have bad attitudes. They get violent. So I stay away from those who do get violent. Try to, because I don't want to be around that energy. I pick up that energy, and I don't want to pick it up anymore. And I'll ask for prayer for my sister Janie. We found out today that her heart's wearing out on her. And Janie shares a birthday with Joy, so yeah. And Janie has helped us out. So I'll ask for good vibes and prayers, whatever you call it. Doesn't matter how you call it. Pretty much the same. It's energy, good vibrations. It's either way. I have a dog in here that got too hot. That I had to let in. Spot. So I'll let y'all go for the night. Good night, y'all. Take care. Want to do this next week? I could sign up for one next week and we'll do this again. Okay, good night. Ciao for now.